Hi, everybody. Andrew Cuneo here. I'm very excited to have a very special guest, Nathan Steuer, here. We're going to be going through his Arena Championship covered draft, and we're also going to talk a little bit about his standard deck. So happy to have you here, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to kind of go over this draft where I definitely think I made some mistakes, and I found it to be sort of a hard seat to navigate, and also the standard deck choice, which I think had some motivations behind playing it that were a little bit off base, but overall, I was happy with the deck selection and with what I knew at the time. I think it was a good choice.
All right, so before we go into the draft, let's get into that. I saw Austin tweet that he felt you had a broken deck, and Austin certainly never suffers from a lack of confidence. Did you think the same thing going into the tournament, or?
So, I mean, I wouldn't have put it that far. I thought that both Austin and Andre were super high on the deck and thought it was the best deck to have in the metagame by far, with basically no bad matchups. And I think my perception was somewhere close to. I think that we are favored against the red black builds of any variety, and we're favored against domain ramp. If there's no Esper and not a lot of soldiers and other aggro decks, I feel that we have an edge going into it. But we also just didn't really know that much about the deck. Like, we had a limited amount of games under our belt.
So now that you've gone through the tournament, do you still feel that same way, or like obviously the results didn't match your expectations?
Yeah, I mean, I still feel strongly that the results were quite off base with what the conclusions were that we came to. And I think also the reality of it is that it's somewhere closer to a little bit worse than we thought, but still ahead in the matchups that we thought it was good in. And that being the red black mid range stock builds and also the domain ramp builds. But I do think it's important to cover. I mean, maybe you have some questions pertaining to this, but why did we end up here, and like, how did we end up coming to the conclusion that this deck is so good in these matchups where the data and everything suggests, oh, it's actually not as good?
Yeah, I guess if you want to talk about that, I'd be interested to hear. So you said that you think it's favored against the stock Rakdos mid range, and I can say that in the past when I've tested for tournaments, sometimes I felt like I got trapped into we just tested against one stock build over and over again, and we wound up making a deck that was maybe good against that exact list, but if their list had evolved or deviated at all, like our testing wasn't nearly as valid as we thought it was. Do you think some of that happened, or do you think you just got unlucky?
I mean, there was one big thing we missed, which is a lot of the black-red decks that did well had Gix's command in them, which was not a sideboard card that we tested against. And I think it kind of played into them artificially having, well, I guess naturally having answers to Ojutai that we weren't expecting. We thought that if you resolved an Ojutai, that you were almost guaranteed to win in a lot of the games. But in terms of variance, I thought that we would do better against the Breach variants, and it turns out that we didn't really spend a ton of time testing against the Breach, the multiverse versions, just because we thought that our counters would be even better, whereas the reality was that they were more threat dense and they had more cards that we had to counter, so our counter spells were a lot more taxed, and then if something slips through the cracks, our deck was not good at coming back from behind at all.
Were you at all concerned about the mana base in the deck? Because when I've tried to play like Jeskai in standard, you're just obviously your mana's worse than the 3-colored allied combinations.
Yeah, I think we thought the mana base was quite suspect and didn't really have a great solution to that. There was some consistency issues, but there's also the problem of we had different people playing the black red side of the matchup and losing, and then we'd swap sides and the same thing would happen. And I think that we didn't really have enough games to speak with confidence, but there was a degree of we really want this deck to be good against black red. We're having a lot of success playing against black red, and even going to the tournament like the day before, I kind of had some last minute checks, and so the results in the tournament didn't necessarily align with our experience testing for it, which happens all the time when it's only 5 people testing for a tournament and maybe you're playing, I don't know, 15 matches a day at a high end. I mean, yeah, not a lot to go off of, but yeah.
Yeah, it looked like an interesting deck to me, but I guess looking at it before the tournament started, I wasn't expecting it to be a great deck, and I don't know. I can't say I've played any games with it. It looks to me like the mana is really going to be a problem, and I
Yeah.
also it sort of seemed like you probably should have had one more land in your deck even.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. The mana base was a slight problem. I mean, going into it, we knew that it was a problem. We spent time on the mana base and just thought that this was the best we could do. Um, but regardless, there was also the bigger issue, which is that our deck is kind of structurally bad. Like, we have cards in it that don't really work that well together. For example, our Fables are not that good in this deck. Like, we're playing
Yeah.
Fable because you have to play Fable in your red decks, but we're not a very good Fable deck. We can't take advantage of the loot very well. The Goblin token is one of the cards that they could spend removal spells on, whereas they don't have to spend removal on basically anything else. The backside of Fable makes it 2/2 that attacks sometimes. But also, we tested against versions with like 2 duresses, whereas we should have just been testing against versions with 4 all the time, I think. And that was an error in our process that we could have compensated for a little better, I think.
Yeah. Well, so now that Fable's banned, do you think that this is a deck people should give it a try, or can you suggest any replacements for Fable in the deck?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the current build of the deck looks like. One issue is that I think Esper is something that has to be on the upswing, given that it wasn't affected and it was one of the better decks pre-banning, or I guess when Fable wasn't as prevalent in the metagame. And so I would expect that in the short term, there's not really a workable way of making it work. But while Invasion and the Dragon are legal, I feel like that those 2 cards in combination are strong enough to warrant a shell being built around them. I'm just not sure what it looks like currently.
Well, having played on the arena ladder the past couple of days, I can assure you people are definitely trying to make it work.
Yeah.
I've seen people play, I think it's called Rampaging Raptor, the thing that's like a questing beast that flips
Yeah.
battles. I've
That's
seen them
cool.
play Fairy Mastermind. I've seen them play, I forget it's like a 3/1 guy that you can blitz and it makes a treasure when it dies.
Oh, the
Privateer,
Requisitioner. Yeah.
somebody.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, people want that deck to work. And I don't think they found the right combination yet, but maybe they'll eventually find it. But let's get
Yeah.
to the main reason I wanted to talk to you, which was to go over this draft of yours. So before we get into it, you won Pro Tour March of the Machines, and I believe that you went 4-1-1 in draft there.
Yeah, 4-1-1.
Yeah,
Exactly.
if you had been on a team with some of the people I used to test with, you would never hear the end of having chosen to intentionally draw when you're in contention for top 8 at the beginning of day 2.
I I assure you I still have not heard the end of it, but
All right.
but
Well,
it's a good sign at this point. It could have looked horrible. Now I can just get made fun of for it, and it's like, yeah, I made a
yeah,
heinous decision, but scoreboard, we both top aided.
yeah, you and Carl both made the top 8, so you're good enough. You can make just awful decisions like that, and it still works
Yes,
out.
exactly.
All right. So you went 4-1-1 there. Going into this, did you feel confident in this draft format? Did you feel like you really had it like a full command of it, or did you feel like you wanted to prepare some beyond what you'd done for the Pro Tour?
Yeah, I think that I felt good. So one of my strengths in general is I think that when I'm playing games, my game sense of like what the game is about and what I need to play towards is quite strong. And I think that one hole I have is I tend to start a draft biasing into maybe 3 to 4 different directions in the draft. And if it doesn't go into a lane that I can discern pretty quickly, I end up maybe missing 1 or 2 critical picks as I'm trying to figure out what my deck is going to look like. Most of the time, I'll end up with a functional deck that resembles a direction that I have planned going into. But this draft, at the second draft at the Pro Tour, was a good example of when things go wrong. For those of you who haven't watched that, I sort of fumbled around and ended up in black red, where my teammate and neighbor Simon Nielsen was passing to me as a black red player. So I think that I do feel confident in this draft format after I spent maybe the last 10 days before the Arena Champs doing it just a ton of drafts with Max Mick, who is a really excellent limited player and helped my understanding of the format. But prior to that, for the Pro Tour, I was a little less certain about the draft and more certain about the gameplay.
Okay, so let's look at this first pack you opened, which we've got Croxa and Kunaros, and I guess Cyber Cryptomancer's maybe the best common. I don't know if you'd pick a different one out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the next best card in the pack is one of these white cards, like between the Phyrexian Awakening, which I sort of like, and maybe Angelic Intervention, but I also like the Cryptomancer. Nothing super exciting, right?
Yeah, this seems to me like the kind of pack that you're really not very happy to open because I mean, starting with a three-color gold card, and especially one that is probably the worst three-color combination you could possibly start with, is not ideal. So I think if there's a preening champion in this pack, you would definitely take that, right?
Yeah, I'm slamming Printing Champion. I'm not sure where the line is on what cards I would take over this, but there's a lot of them.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you was, do you look at 17 lands data at all to prepare?
It's sort of complicated. I don't personally find it that useful for myself, but when I'm on a team full of 17 lands truthers who love going through that data and figuring out what the population has determined is better or worse, I tend to be exposed to a lot of it. So yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm a huge believer.
Okay, because I was interested in that. I there were a couple of picks I checked to see if I could figure out how devoted you were to it. And so there's one issue with the 17 lands data that the things most people look at is from best of one as opposed to the best of three gameplay. And like I think that that really warps a lot of card values.
Yeah.
And so in this case, like Cryptomancer is, I believe, the highest performing card. It's certainly like notably better than Croxon and Kunaros in best of one. But actually, if you go and look at the best of three data, Croxon and Kunaros is the best performing card, I believe. So it sort of, I guess we would say 17 lands data agrees with what you decided to do, but it's certainly up to interpretation. So
Yeah.
given that you picked the Croxa here, what are you expecting your deck to look like? Like, what color combinations are you going to consider, and what's your preference?
So going into it, I had a pretty strong bias towards taking all the black cards. I think it's pretty much public knowledge at this point that black is the best color, if not the second best color. You could maybe argue blue. Um, I was pretty happy to see if I can be in a black deck of some kind, but not really committed to it at all. I like black red as an archetype. It's something that I've had a lot of success with, and I find that especially if you get one or two of the multicolored cards, either Jury or the Stormclaw Rager, your decks can end up looking quite excellent. So I was pretty happy to take this with the idea that if I can take any of the 2 mana commons in black, either Blade or Nizumi Informant, and then some number of sack outlets, I can make this card work in the late game.
Okay, so you're really kind of focused on being a black deck as opposed to like a 5-color green deck, or I think probably the worst way to use Kunaros would be to try to be like a white-red splash black deck. That seems pretty bad.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so moving on to pack 2. This is easier to do when people are drafting in paper, where I can figure out when they're about to actually pick the card. All right.
Yeah.
Did they force you to use this view when you were drafting, or is this the view you choose to use?
This is the view I choose to use. Do you like the alternative view where you have like the column?
Yeah, I always, from streaming and from making videos, I do it with the column just so the cards are bigger for people to be able to see them.
Yeah.
I do it so much to the point that I would find it just very distracting to use this view.
I think I play a lot more Magic Online, so on Magic Online it's a lot easier to do this just because it's the same exact layout basically, but
Yeah.
I can understand playing a lot of Arena why that would be harder.
All right, so this pack, you certainly, if you were hoping to be a black deck, you've got some good options here. How do you feel about the invasion of Asgol? Is that like a card you're happy to play? It's a card you're willing to play?
I would be happy to play it in most of my black red decks, but I really don't have a high premium on taking it early. I also can't really imagine taking it over something like Collective Nightmare. If this Collective Nightmare wasn't in the pack, it would be a lot harder to discern what you're supposed to take here. I don't really know what I would take if it wasn't in the pack, to be quite honest. I think even something like the Alabaster would be in my under consideration for me, but I don't love a lot of these white black decks, and so it's hard for me to imagine a lane with that card in mind.
Yeah. So when you were playing the games, was it open deck lists?
It was open deck list, yeah.
Okay. So did you go into it thinking you would have any premium on convoke cards, just like to make it a little bit harder for people to play against you, or is that something you weren't really thinking about at all?
It wasn't really actively on my mind, to be quite honest. I think that it's certainly an upside, but I wasn't considering it so highly.
Okay, I mean, I think Collective Nightmares, pretty clearly the best card in this pack. But I think that it makes it's a lot harder to play against somebody if you know their list has convoke cards in it, as opposed to just that they can't have anything when they're tapped out.
Yeah, that's a great point. What's your opinion on something like Fearless Scout?
I do like. I think that is a 5 drop. That's actually you get a pretty good deal when you cast it, but I wouldn't consider it next to Collective Nightmare. Like I think
Yeah.
if the Nightmare wasn't in the pack, I probably would take Fearless Skull here. I didn't think your idea of taking the Alabaster Host Intercessor sounded very appealing to me.
No, me neither. Even after saying it, I feel like, I mean, one of my priorities is I want to try to take cheaper cards early in these stages just because I think that's one of the worst ways that these black or red decks can end up when you just have too many expensive cards, especially early on. I'll prioritize them, but this pack really has no other options if you don't have Collective Nightmare, so you have to take a more premium expensive card.
Oh, okay. I see where the timer is now, so maybe I can time this a little better. All right. So this next pack, we've got the 2 mana black card that you said you were interested in, the Nizumi Informant. You're pretty high on that card, I take it?
Yeah, I'm quite high on Nizumi Informant. I think it's one of the best commons, and I just want as many copies of this as possible if I want to end up black red, just because the incentives to having these 1 mana 1/1s and turning your suboptimal cards like Threaten into a deck with the sack outlets is appealing to me, as well as it is quite good on rate. It does help and play well with Collective Nightmare, and something like Completed Huntmaster is a card I'm interested in later in the draft if I could pick up a copy. So I always keep in mind that that card's premium goes up significantly if you are to pick up multiple Nizumi Informants.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised you immediately went to the Nizumi Informant over the Huntmaster. But I went and looked at the 17 land stats, and very clearly the Informant is better than the Huntmaster. There's no getting around it.
Yeah, to give you another frame of reference, a card that I'm pretty happy to have in my decks is Ichor Drinker, and I try pretty highly to draft decks where cards like Nizumi Informant and Ichor Drinker are good, and so it makes picking something like Nizumi Informant a lot easier for me when I end up in a situation like this.
So this pack, I think, is probably the first time you've had what I think is a really pretty close decision.
Yeah.
So what's jumping out to you here?
So I see basically the strongest card in the pack you could say is maybe this Portent Tracker if you like green decks, and it kind of fits in line with me wanting to take cheap cards, and doesn't really work well with the Caneros, which I'm willing to abandon depending on how the draft goes. I'm not attached to it at all. I like the Knight. The 4-mana Knight is good, but when I'm drafting black and white, and here I'm pretty confident that I want to be black in this draft, I don't really know if it's better than the other black-white options. I also think that the 4-drop slot is more replaceable in the black-white decks, and the 2 bodies that you get from it is not that valuable. So for me, that kind of boiled down to, do I want to be in a green deck? Not really. So I have to pick between these 2 white-black multicolored cards, which is tricky.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you're not really a fan of the white black deck some.
No, I mean, the next best card is like the Temporal Cleansing, which, I do like Temporal Cleansing a decent amount, but I haven't seen any blue cards from the right yet. I still feel interested in seeing if I'm going to play this Cuneros, and I could see how taking one of these white-black cards can allow me to end up in white-black later on, or not even white-black necessarily. I'm thinking at this point that I'm going to splash white, honestly. Like I don't see it me ending up in white black.
Okay. I think I might have taken Sculpted Perfection there because I think I'm a little
Yeah.
bit more willing to be white black. And this early in the draft, you can, sort of start to slant into a deck where Sculpted Perfection is good. But if you're really just thinking that you're going to be red black / white, if you use the Kunaros, I can see where, Sculpted Perfection is not going to fit great in that deck probably.
Yeah, I do think Sculpted Perfection is a better card, to be clear, and I think that it's a nicer build around, which is why it was such a tough pick for me. Like a lot of my mental energy was spent thinking, what sort of Phyrexians do I want at this stage? Like my issues with Sculpted Perfection are mostly that the cheap Phyrexians aren't always that great when you like if I want to pick up something like a Dreg Recycler or play like Ichor Shade, I'm not that happy. And so it makes me less inclined to take that card, even if on power level I think it's much better.
You got to make those Ichor drinkers into tutus.
Yeah, that is true.
All right, this is another, I think, pretty interesting pick. So you've gone
Yeah.
right to Seal from Existence. And I think that this is one of the picks that kind of sets the whole direction of your draft. Are you not that big of a fan of Invasion of Olgrotha?
So it's funny. I haven't been that high on that card for quite a while. Like I really just didn't think it was that great. And I talked to Maximic leading up to the Arena Champs, and he basically convinced me the whole week that a lot of the battles were something that I was underrating, that I needed to value them more highly, and that this Invasion in particular is a card that he was quite high on. So I played with it a bit more, and I was impressed with it. So I ended up thinking that it was decent, but I do still think that going into these drafts, removal is a lot harder to get when the players around you are quite competent. And I placed a higher premium on trying to have cheaper removal spells. I think Seal is a better card than the Invasion, and I didn't really think it was close. Like again, I just thought the 3 mana unconditional removal spell was much better than having a 5-drop. Whereas I could definitely fill in my curve with more expensive cards later as the draft went on.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you're right that Seal is actually just like substantially better than Invasion just as a card. Um, I also think that like the color flexibility of just staying black probably made it worth picking the Invasion.
Yeah,
But
I could totally see that.
it's certainly it's a pretty tough pick. I think I will say that I think for most of this format I've been overvaluing the battles, so I'm definitely coming at it from a different like a different perspective than you.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have felt like the battles can be good, but I just wanted to stay in this, yeah, take a cheaper unconditional removal. And I could see why I could be wrong just because it made my decision to stay in black white a lot more tenuous as the draft went on. Like I kind of was forced into black white with this pick. It's pretty committal. Um, so, and again, I passed Sculpt to Perfection with the idea that I wasn't necessarily going to be in black white, and then I took a white card. So those things are kind of at odds with each other.
Yeah.
Would your draft deck have looked much different than this at this point?
Uh, I would have Sculpted Perfection and the Invasion, but
Okay.
I would have done roughly the same thing you did. Let's start with the Crocs and being like some sort of black deck. So this is another pick where you've got a land, which is you're certainly going to want to get some of the lands if you're going to play the Crocs. There's the invasion of I think it's Dominaria. Are you not a fan of that one at all, or
Is this the make a 2/2 or gain 4 life and draw a card? I think it's
it's
gain 4 life.
gain 4 life and if it flips you get a Sarah Angel.
Yeah, I just don't think that Blackwood is that good at pressuring these battles. And again, it might be another time where I'm underrating how good this battle is. I haven't had that great of an experience with them to the point where even in my white decks, I don't end up playing it that often. So maybe that just speaks to having a vastly different experience in the format.
No, I think that this is a spot where I would have picked the land too. I think you're
Yeah,
right to
yeah.
do it, but like I think that if the land isn't there, you probably should be picking the battle. I mean, the rest of this pack's pretty bad.
There's
Unless
not really any other options. Yeah.
Unless you're a big fan of the Bladed Battle fan.
This is certainly not where I wanted to be at this point in the draft. I mean, ideally, I would have had a stronger signal that red or blue is open, and I definitely felt the pressure of my neighbor to the right might be in a combination of red and blue and green because I haven't seen those colors really at all. I
Yeah,
saw Port and Tracker,
so
but that was it.
your neighbor to the right was Daniel Brody, right? Who was your teammate?
No, Daniel Brody was 2 seats to my left. Michael Jacob was 1 seat to my left, and then the person to my right was named Noam, I think.
Oh,
That was his
okay.
name. Yeah.
I thought I saw a graphic that said something different, but either I'm misremembering or the graphic was wrong. Both of those could easily be true. So this pack is quite bad.
Yeah.
I don't know that there's
You could
anything
take a
really.
drag recycler or a blue black land, right? That's kind of it.
Or, I mean, you could maybe take Cybo Cryptomancer just in case you want to switch into blue. But
I feel like if I end up blue here, it's because I want some combination of like the scab plus unsealed, depending on how my deck turns out. Or maybe I end up in fully blue, in which case that could be a pretty big punish. But I don't think I valued the Cryptomancer that highly.
yeah. All right, so here we've got another drag recycler or marauding dreadship. I guess if you're really feeling frisky, you could take that historian, but that would be kind of crazy. Are you a fan of the dreadship at all?
I like the dreadship. If I end up in black red, I want a few copies of the dreadship just to make my random crappy creatures a little bit better. I'm not excited about it here, but this is another pick where I'm not sure if I should just take the drag recycler. I feel like it's pretty replaceable, but again, it's a bear, and I value having those early on pretty highly, so I could prioritize more expensive cards later. I'm not sure if I agree with this pick in retrospect, but for me, I think it was me feeling I might still not be in white, and if I were feeling that way, it would have been a good reason to take the invasion over seal. Okay, so I did take the bear. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that you were probably thinking that you're certainly not going to splash marauding dreadship. So
No.
if you're playing seal of it from existence, you're going to want to take the black card.
Yeah.
I've come to think of the marauding dreadship as like a poor man's preening champion, just because it's your 3-mana common where you get 2 things. They're not really as good as the preening champion, but you're still getting 2 things. So
yeah, I mean, I like the card, but I mean, it also doesn't really work well with what I have right now.
So here, we're getting down to the dregs basically.
Yeah. And this is also a punish for not taking the Sculpted Perfection. I mean, if I take Sculpted Perfection, maybe I want to take the Skyward in here. I'm not sure how highly you value the Tarkir Dune Shaper.
I don't value it very highly at all, but it seems like a lot of good players do play it very frequently and value it. Is that a card that you actively want to have in your deck?
Not really, to be honest. I know a lot of people do like the card a lot, but my experience hasn't really aligned with it being great. I thought that my deck could end up in a way in which it was a card I wanted to put in my deck, but I wasn't excited about it at all.
Yeah. So here we've got Ichor Shade and Chinurd Oilcaster and the Mirrodin Avenged, which is probably the worst of these, but they're all pretty bad.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I just end up taking the Ichor Shade with the 2 drag recyclers, just thinking that, I mean, there's some way that it ends up good.
Yeah.
What do you think of Ichor Shade? I mean, my experience with it has been it's a little bit better than I initially thought, but still pretty unexciting.
Yeah, it seems pretty bad to me. Every once in a while it makes my deck, but it seems way worse than like anything you might play that costs 1 or 2 mana.
Yeah. Here I'm thinking about Halo Hopper. I'm not sure if I take this over the 4/3. I think I end up taking the 4/3. Maybe not though. I think if not, that was a mistake.
So you like the 4/3? Are you're willing to play it?
I don't like the card, but I mean, I'm willing to play it, and I think that there are certain decks where I need something that fills that role in my 5-drop slot just to produce some additional value, and I'm okay playing 1. It is still kind of the scraps, and I couldn't really picture what a good Halo Hopper deck looked like at this point. It was hard for me to picture, to be honest.
Yeah. So did you consider the Niv Mizzet at all? Like thinking maybe I'm gonna switch into like, more of a green black deck and, be five colors, or is that just something you're not even willing to do?
In retrospect, maybe that's the right thing to hedge on, but I didn't even really process that that was a card that I could take, I think, at that point.
Yeah. All right, so here you're going to get a 4/3, I think, over a
Yeah.
Halo Hopper. So you've gotten one of each. When given the
What
choice,
do
you
you
mix
think
and
of the
match.
Halo Hopper?
It's pretty bad.
Would you ever want to try to make it work with a shell like this, or you just can't see it either?
No, I don't see playing that unless you're like, I think maybe if you're some sort of convoking heavy like red blue deck, but I think in a black deck you're there's so many mediocre like 3 mana commons, you're never going to be really hurting for them, and you're not going to be so
Yeah.
excited about convoking. All
Okay.
right, so finally a pack with some better cards in it at least,
Yes.
but probably not what you were hoping to see.
Yeah. This is sort of where the draft, I think, takes a pretty bad turn. I do feel that Volcanic Spite is certainly the best card in the pack. What is your thought there? Well, I guess
Yeah,
if I'm in blue, maybe the Transcendent Message, but even then, I think it's close.
yeah,
Quite close.
I think it's those two are the two best cards, and I really don't think you should splash Transcendent Message in your deck.
No. I'm super high on this Aetherblade Agent, and I do want more premium 2 drops. I think Elspeth Smite is good, but not on the same tier as these cards. And if I'm already splashing red for Kuneros, then it makes sense to me that I would want to splash red for Volcanic Spite as well. It is good in the late game, and the other issue is that there's just not that many other cards that I'd want to splash otherwise. I mean, I don't have to splash this, but this pick for me was just between this and the Aetherblade Agent. And I think I would take Agent in retrospect just because I think that it's not something I have to splash. It is a premium 2 drop. I'm not excited about playing Dread Recyclers if I'm playing Black White and have no other incentive. So right now I see myself as only having like maybe 1 to 1.5 2 drops, like really not many.
Yeah, I would have taken the Volcanic Spite there, or Volcanic
Okay.
Spite.
Yeah.
So you're pretty happy to see Norn's Inquisitor here. There's also the Scorn Blade Berserker, which is certainly a very good card as well.
Yeah.
But you think just a white black deck, Norn's Inquisitor is just better than Scorn Blade Berserker?
The power of the card is so high. If you ever get multiples, it can salvage a bad deck like this. I am looking for ways for my deck to up its power level, and I think Scorn Blade is good, but if I'm not taking Nord's Inquisitor, it just seems like a major mistake, to be honest.
Yeah. I think the only argument for the Berserker would be like if you're considering maybe you're not going to be a base white deck, like maybe you think you're going to be a red black deck splashing a little bit of white, but I think the Inquisitor is just the better card for sure.
Yeah. This is a really unexciting pack, and this is a pack where you're like, whoa, like there's really nothing good for me in this pack. Like what happened? I'm not excited about taking Bloodfell Caves, but nothing else really crossed my mind as an option. I don't really want to take Aerial Boost with what I have right now. I want to make sure that this splash is easy, and I just picked up Spite, so I want another red source.
If you were a red black deck, would you be looking to play the Beamtown Beat Stick?
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, I like the Beat Stick, but I also think that red black feels a little bit hard for me to get to at this point. It's probably closer than I think. I really only have 2 good white cards right now. Maybe I guess 3 with the splash.
Yeah, it's you definitely. It sounds like the way you're talking about it, you're much more locked into white black than I maybe would have been at this point. Like I think I would have been floating still between white black and red black.
Yeah, I mean, I still think there's a lot of ways that I could end up red black from here, to be clear, but the Bloodfell Caves I think
Obviously,
at
it's
the
going to work in a
time,
red-black deck too, so it's
yeah,
I think
I
it
think I'm
makes a lot
still
of sense.
splashing white regardless. So the Bloodfell Cave seems like one way that I can make the splash work in any direction. Would you take the beat stick here and hedge that way?
No, I would take the Bloodfell Caves as well. I
Yeah.
think that it's just obviously going to make your deck at this point. So whereas the beat stick probably wouldn't. Also, that was just a terrible pack. It wasn't like you're in the wrong seat. Like there just weren't any good cards in the pack.
Yeah. This is probably the pick in the draft that I regret the most.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Rankle was a nice hedge if I wanted to consider being in black red, but the big mistake that I see is I feel my deck, in order to be good, needs to revolve around something like Unsealed and Necropolis, just given that I'm going into it thinking the most premium cards I can pick up are more Nazumis. I want my deck to be able to recur my expensive bombs, and Rankle is the type of card that, while it's very good if I end up black red, um, there's a good chance I don't play it. So I think the risk might not be worth the reward of passing this Unseal versus playing the Rankle if I end up exactly black red. Um, and then I also start thinking here, maybe I can splash Rankle. I do think it's quite good. So I was uncertain if that was something I could possibly do.
Yeah, I would have taken the Rankle for sure.
Yeah.
But like I said, I would have been I would have still I think I would have been thinking more about being black red than it sounds like you were from the way you're describing it.
It's hard for me to say at the time how I was thinking exactly about it because I do know that I was excited to see Rankle. Like, okay, this is like a sign I could be in black red, and it was on my mind as soon as I saw that pack. But I do value Unseal very highly, so it was certainly tricky.
All right, so now this pack that certainly has stuff you can consider. There's nothing super premium, or at least nothing jumps out to me as being super premium.
Yeah.
Are you is Traumatic Revelation a card you're just always going to play as many copies as you get, or is it something that sometimes makes your deck, sometimes doesn't?
I tend to find that it makes my deck, and I'll play up to like 3 to 4 copies, but 4 sounds like a lot. I guess 2 to 3 copies probably. It's a very good card. I think that Deluge is a premium sideboard card, and I think that I still might be in white, in which case it's not as great. But the other thing I was thinking about is there a way for me to make Ichor Drinker good in this pack, and or in this deck rather? And I couldn't really think of many ways beyond. It's kind of good with Rankle. It's okay with like Drag Recycler. It's good with anything like the White Black Invasion if that comes around. I believe that was in the pack with Elspeth Smite and the Volcanic
Yeah.
Spite. So that was something that crossed my mind, but I also just wanted to have the first copy of Traumatic Revelation a lot.
I think I would have taken Ichor Drinker, but
Yeah.
I don't think I'm as excited about Traumatic Revelation as you are. And also, it sounds like you're not that excited about having Dreg Recycler in your deck unless you're like specifically the Furnace Rains kind of deck.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes from being a great card if you've got a couple Furnace Rains to just like a playable card if you don't really have reasonable stuff to sack at all.
Yeah, I'm not excited about it. I mean, I would rather avoid playing it if I can, if it's just a 2-minute 2/2 with that ability. But I'll play it if I have to in the black base decks. This pick is kind of tricky because it was hard for me to envision exactly Ichor Drinker's role, but there's also small benefits like having another 1-drop that's good is good with Furja. If I were to pick up something like Unseal and sign another copy, I would be happy to have Ichor Drinkers. Um, I I think that we just maybe have slightly different evaluations of how good Traumatic Revelation is because going into it, I did find that it was in the top 4 or 5 black commons.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. We have kind of different revel. But also, I really never I didn't prepare to draft this format at a high level event, so it's like I've just played a bunch of arena best of one. So I really I would take your opinion over mine for sure.
here's a pick where it's. I mean, I value Shatter highly, but again, I think I was thinking that I want to play the first seal, and if I take Shatter, it's hard to play the first seal. And so I was less committed to doing something like taking the Shatter and being in black red. Do you have any consideration for taking Shatter over the seal?
I I think I might have, because it's sort of, I think you're either going to be giving up the seal or the rankle, probably, because you're so heavily in black that I don't think that there's any way black's going to wind up being your splash color. And you just, even though you've gotten two of the lands, you don't, it's not like you have an abundance of fixing at this point. So just splashing a double color card, you have to give up one of them. And you really haven't, like, you got that once. I guess you have the Norn's Inquisitor. So maybe you're a little bit better off being based in white.
Also, remember we saw no red cards in pack one, though, from the right. Like, basically no playable red cards, right?
Yes.
I thought that the signal of the seal in pack one, like pick 4 or 5, was maybe stronger than it was in reality. We didn't see a ton of white cards either, to be fair, but I wasn't sure if red was going to be particularly open. I thought Rankle was good and probably not splashable. So this was around the point where I was regretting taking the Rankle over Unseal, because I recognized that if that was a pick that I was going to be presented with later, I should have had that foresight, I think, that I would have preferred the seal or some other white-based removal spell. Like if it was pacifism, for example, I'm not sure what I take.
I think I probably would have been thinking that I want to be red black more at this point and get to play the Rankle. And I'm just going to gamble on the upside of maybe there's going to be, like, maybe I'm still going to get 2 Furnace Rains.
Like, well, I just thought I would play Furnace Rains in my Mardu deck.
Yeah, but it's not going to be as good as if you aren't going to be able to play the Rankle, or you aren't kind of building around the idea that you're going to be a red black sack deck. Some of this stuff, the structure of this tournament, did you need to go like 6-3, or so? It's not like at a PT, where at a PT you really kind of want to high roll in the drafts, because if you don't go like 4-2 or better, it's almost impossible to make top 8. And even, I think most of the time you make top 8 at a PT, everyone's gone 5-1 or better. I guess they're slightly smaller now, so you don't need the high roll as much in the drafts, but you definitely,
I think you just have to go 12-4, so it's pretty hard to go 9-1 and constructed. I mean, you're kind of right that you have to go 4-2 or better if you're going to top 8.
Yeah. All right, so this is, you said you're a big fan of Traumatic Revelation. You're an even bigger fan of 4-mana Mind Rot.
Yeah, I like this card a decent amount. I mean, it fills a spot in my curve that's sort of missing. I like when you flip this card, how strong the backside is on a lot of board states, just to chip your opponent down. This is a battle that I like.
See, that's interesting to me. Like, this battle, I haven't been that impressed by relative to Invasion of Olgrotha, which I've actually liked better.
Yeah.
All right, so this is like Phyrexian Censor over nothing, essentially. You're not going to play any of these other cards.
Yeah, I mean, this pick kind of made me feel like red is really not open. We've seen no red cards. We saw Shatter. We took Spite first pick. We saw Rankle, but no one's going to take Rankle if they're in red unless they're in red black. I don't know if red is open in either direction at this point. And I guess it did turn out that my neighbor on my right and my neighbor on my left were both in red. Yeah.
So it sounds like I would have gambled and lost.
Well, mine didn't pay off too significantly, but yeah. This was a pretty hard seat. I mean, I guess we'll cover it at the end, but there was no really pivotal moment of like, maybe if I'd done this, it could have ended up in a different color combination that would have been more successful by the end. I mean, I suppose if you think that gambling on red-black could have turned out that way, you could frame it like that.
I think the only way that you could have gotten to a better deck at this point is if you'd maybe take the Sculpted Perfection and leaned more into like some of the Phyrexian themed stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's the way you're in the strongest position going into the third pack is if you've got Sculpted Perfection with Norn's Inquisitor and Phyrexian Censor, and like you've got some Attentive Skywarden type stuff.
Right. And then the upside of getting a second copy of Sculpted Perfection is pretty high as well.
Yeah. So you're sorting your creatures separate from your non-creature cards. Is that because you have like a target number of creatures you want to have in your deck, or is it just a
I mean, I think I just want to envision what my deck is going to look like, and at this point, it's a little harder for me to see it if I have all the spells there. I'm not that excited about Aerial Boost in this deck. It's a pretty poor Aerial Boost deck, and so I'm not even sure I'm going to play those. But in general, I like the card, and I would really like some better 2-drops because I'm not excited about playing Dreg Recycler.
All right, so this is an interesting pack. We've got the Linvala, which is certainly good, but to me, not insane. And we've got Vanquish the Weak, which is something that I think you'd be very happy to play. Probably it's just between those two. Do you have like strong opinions on Linvala, or?
I don't have super strong opinions on it other than looking at my deck. I feel like I'm light on actual ways of winning the game. I could see that being a tension point, and I wanted to build my deck in a way that I felt like I can close. One thing I noticed is like if I take the Vanquish the Weak, I'm not really sure how I'm winning versus the Drawn on Linvala feels like a pretty clear path to like I can use this 3/4 pretty effectively. I mean, it's not great. It's 3/4 flyer for 4, but the ability does come up, and I don't need removal spells that highly anymore. So I feel much more confident taking the Linvala at that point.
Had you been paying attention to all the cards you've seen so far in the pod to know what abilities you might be getting?
I mean, to be honest, I don't really. I think the main abilities you can get are like from the green creatures, like the 2-mana 2/2 you can pump for 4, the Portent Tracker. Maybe you can add a mana or Protected Battle. But there's not a ton. It's just like kind of tacked on ability, right?
Yeah, it's definitely more for constructed. Yeah. Or more just to make the name make sense, I guess. There was a time a long time ago when like the 4-mana Linvala, the OG white one, was a very popular sideboard card in Modern.
Yeah, I played with that card a bit when I was when I was younger and playing the not Malira, the Vizir's Coco deck or whatever, right after Pod got banned. And we played Linvalas. I mean, passing a Preening Champion never feels good. That's for sure.
Yeah. All right. So here you've got to be excited about the Aetherblade Agent because you really want 2-drops, and this is certainly an upgrade over a Dreg Recycler.
Yeah. This was another point where I really just wanted a critical mass of good 2-drops. That's why I'm saying that I sort of regret taking the Volcanic Spite with the way my deck turned out. And at this point, I would definitely have preferred the Spike to be an Aetherblade Agent. I'm not really sure what I'm doing with the sorting right now. I guess I'm just trying to picture how many actual 2-drops I have, 2-mana cards. But my expensive cards are not looking very good right now either. So it's kind of a mess.
And given what you've said about Nezumi and Foreman, I assume this is a very easy pick for you. There's not even really much else you would consider, I think.
Yeah, I mean, these packs have been pretty weak.
Given that this is pod play, it doesn't feel like you've really passed anything that you would be that concerned that like the people in the pod are going to have some sort of ridiculous deck.
No, I'm curious to see to hear if you saw some of the decks in the pod though, because it was pretty funny how it turned out.
I did not. Are you going to get a third informant here?
I think this is where I decided to take the Huntmaster.
Yeah.
I felt kind of more confident at this point after picking up the second Nezumi that I just wanted the Huntmaster because I didn't have like the 1-mana sack, draw 2 cards, or any other thing that played well with the Nezumi in particular. And this is a nice payoff to have. Plus, they're I like the Huntmaster, and we don't have that many good 3-drops because I'm not excited to play Ichor Shade either.
It sounds like you really place a pretty big premium on like having sort of a specific curve, or like
Yeah.
having like you really want to have good 4 drops, really want to have good 5 drops. Whereas oftentimes, like as long as I have enough cheap cards, I don't really feel like I care that much about my curve. But that doesn't seem to be how you're approaching it.
I mean, there is a degree of like my 5 drops, my 4 drops can be whatever. I don't care that much about that. Um, I definitely care a lot more about having my cheap cards be more premium. But I was trying to picture how I can win games because I didn't feel like I could win games on the ground that well. I have a lot of removal, and so I kind of have to kill everything, and my 2/2s and 1/1s don't do that good of a job of it. So in this deck in particular, I'm thinking that I need my late game cards to be better at winning the game.
Yeah. All right, here finally you've got something to be excited about. Deadly Derision.
Yeah.
I don't think you could possibly pick anything else out of this pack.
No, I was very happy to pick up a Deadly Derision here. Yeah, I'm gonna send you just so you can see like some of the decks in this pod, despite what we saw, ended up quite strong. Like surprisingly, just very, very powerful decks. This was just one example of my round 3 in the 1/1 bracket when I faced.
So we've got to breach the multiverse deck with Chandra. Okay, yeah, that person got some good picks.
And an Atali in there in the white black invasion. It was quite the deck.
Yeah. All right, so here are you taking this Alabaster Host Intercessor because you're concerned about having your mana work, or you don't want a second Traumatic Revelation, or you're high on the Intercessor?
I just wanted another expensive card that made me feel like I could win late games. That was definitely a primary concern in my mind, which is I don't know what I'm going to do. Like I can just try to trade 1-for-1 or 2-for-1 with Nizumi and Formants, maybe get half a card out of it with the draw 2 on Eldraine. But yeah, I think I was more concerned maybe than I had to be about having a better late game threat. I felt like my opponents basically only had to use their removal on Drana and Furja, and that was it.
Well, they're going to use the removal on Croxa too.
Yeah, and Croxa, if you get that going. That's true.
So here you've got an option for a second. Oh, it's Intercessor versus Dramatic Revelation again, and you're going to
and now
do the opposite.
Now I'm like, okay, I have my 6-drop. I'm going to take the Traumatic Revelation because I do value it a little higher in general.
Yeah. Elspeth Smite's certainly a card you would have played if you got it, right?
Yeah.
And it's that the Fire Song and Sunspeaker. The card has so many words on it, and it tricks you into thinking it's going to do something, and then you read it 3 or 4 times, and you're like, no, it just doesn't do anything. It doesn't work with the cards in the set at all.
It's a 6-mana 4/6.
Do you know? Funny. Do you remember Dennis Vidugiris?
I know of him. Okay. No, I haven't interacted with him. Yeah.
We one time we were doing some sort of limited meeting, and we were going over. This is like maybe close to 10 years ago. Some rare, and everybody's like, "Yeah, that rare is just bad." And he's like, "What are you talking about? It's a 6-mana 5/5. I would never cut that from my deck." I'm like, what? I mean, the cards were worse than, but they weren't that much worse. We were like, I would never put a 6-mana 5/5 in my deck unless I had a really good ability, and it was some card that just didn't do anything.
Yeah. It's awesome.
So Cut Short, that's a card I always feel like I'm pretty happy to play, but you've just put it right in your sideboard. So I guess you're not that happy to play it.
Yeah, I think I ended up boarding in Cut Short every round and regretting not main decking it. I think my valuation was a little off there.
Because it does, I guess you do have the 2 Seal from Existences, so you've got a good base of removal for sure, but it doesn't really feel like you've got that many removal spells that you would feel like you had too much removal and wouldn't want to play removal past a point.
Yeah, I think the cut short is fine, and I ended up playing something like the Tarkir Dune Shaper over it, which was not particularly good. So that was definitely something I would have changed in retrospect. Just play a cut short in that slot.
So here we're basically to the dregs, and
Yeah.
that's a pick I would not have made.
What else was in the pack?
So we've got the I think
Oh,
it's
flywheel.
Rajav or something like that.
Oh, the Rayev, yeah.
Yeah, like I would have been thinking I'm going to hate this Rayev because it's actually good, and Dexter could be good. And that invasion you just took is so bad. I would have left it in the pack over anything and hope other people
Yeah,
play it.
I think my mind was totally off. I agree. Rayev is just a good card, and then if someone's in white red, they're going to end up with that. That's true.
And you're not placing any value on tricking the people around you into playing that white invasion because that's when they'll
that
fall
is.
for it. Sometimes it's you're not. It's not like you're drawn dead with like Vengeful Earth. Nobody's going to play that. But oh, you just tricked yourself. Oh no, you're all right.
No, no, no,
Protocol
no,
Knight.
no.
All right.
I took a second and realized there was a protocol knight in the bag.
So that was an interesting pick to me. The Chinured Oilcaster is a card that isn't completely unplayable in my mind, and I guess like that the Seraph you
Yeah.
just took is fine too.
I really don't like the oil caster. I mean, again, you see me dragging to the sideboard. I have not really had good experiences if I don't have something else going on that makes the graveyards matter. I don't have Unsealed and Acropolis. I don't have Halo Charge Scab. I think in blue black you can make that card work, but in most other archetypes, it's just a 4 mana, 2/4 menace, which is not very good.
So looking at your final build, you play white black splash red for Croxa and Volcanic Spite, like with I mean you were kind of the way you were intending to throughout the draft. So one thing that was interesting to me was this Infected Defector makes the deck, but it sounded like that is a card you're maybe not happy to play, but you're willing to play. Um,
Yeah.
and also, none
What
of the drag recyclers make your deck, and the Ichor Shade doesn't make the deck.
Yep. So a few things that were on my mind. I basically thought that my deck would struggle to win the game, kind of what I was pointing to earlier, where I was trying to envision how I could end up winning, and it seemed to me like my normal curve of just playing a few 2/2s, killing any blockers, and getting through was not going to be particularly effective. I had to go a little bigger and then be able to hold down the fort with some of my worst creatures. And so my idea was I want to play this extra 5 drop. I believe that I'll have a lot of time, and my deck can flood quite often with how it's currently configured. So, one thing that I could have done was I could have removed the 17th land and played something like a Ichor Shaded Dreg Recycler. Probably a cut short actually would be the next best card. And then that way I'm not as susceptible to flooding. That would be one change I think I would make now, just have that cut short in the deck. Um, Other than that, the Daxos is kind of awkward with how my mana is set up, and I'm not sure if it's worth it. That was sort of a hard decision.
I never like Daxos and Timoret. Those cards, they're just too hard to cast, I think, in this format, has
Yeah.
been my experience.
I think I got a little bit baited by having 2 seals and being like, okay, it's a 2 mana 2/4 a lot.
Yeah. I think I might have wanted it. I think I would have played the first Drag Recycler over the Daxos. Just it's going to be easier to cast, and also every once in a while you do win a game by you just do the final 2 or 3 points of damage with it. It's
Yeah.
not like it doesn't have any text, even if you don't have that much stuff that's you really want to sack.
Yeah. There was a few points in the draft where I cast Dramatic Revelation and just didn't take anything just to have like a turn 3 play with just all removal in hand. It was pretty funny.
Yeah. So did you only have? I guess you have two flying creatures, Drana and Firja. So like the Sarah of New Capenna was not like an appealing thing just to give yourself another flyer.
Again, something I thought about. Yeah, I was pretty uncertain if that card was even good in my deck because, I mean, flipping it is expensive, and I don't think I'm going to. I can use the ability with Nizumian format, I suppose.
Yeah, and also you did wind up playing two battles,
Yep.
and you're not going to be very good at flipping the battles on the ground. Like the only time you're ever going to flip a battle on the ground is when you're just crushing your opponent.
Yeah.
So like all in all, I think that this was a very tough seat, and I think you got to a pretty good result for sure. Maybe if you had somehow had the foreknowledge to go heavier into white black immediately, it could have turned out a little bit better. But I think you did pretty well for what your options were.
Yeah, I definitely think that a few of the things, like you mentioned, with the final build are a little bit off of where I would do it if I could rebuild the deck. It was weird because we didn't see that many good cards, and then I looked at the other decks in the pod, and they were very good. And so it was quite a confusing thing of just like sometimes you end up in a seat where like the good cards don't flow towards you in the right way, or I really didn't even feel like we passed that many good cards, to be quite honest. So it was tricky.
Yeah, this is certainly a format where the good rares are incredibly good, and you didn't really see any that like Croxa and Rankle. They're both fine, but they're nowhere near the level of some of the things that it turns out other people opened, and there's just nothing you can do about that, really. I guess I mean you did
Yeah.
wind up with a bunch of traumatic revelations, so in theory you can make them discard some of the really good rares, but it turned out you said you played against somebody who had breached the multiverse and Chandra, which you can't make them
Breach, Chandra, Atali, and he had the white black invasion. So in one of our games, um, I actually put up a pretty good fight there. I almost beat that deck, which is pretty funny. I stabilized at 1 and was winning one of these games, and he was hellbent and top decked Invasion of Urgatha when he had one draw step. So that was a pretty exciting game to almost win. And then that was the other one where I just cast a discard spell, took like an Atali or some big threat, and then the white black invasion came down, and I was like, okay, like this happens. But yeah, the good rares in this format are so much better.
Did you ramp your opponent into the Atali effectively?
Yeah.
Nice. That's
classic.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like that's going to be a game you win very often.
No, but I did like this draft format a lot. I mean, there's not really any other tournaments in it. I enjoyed playing a lot of the arena opens and stuff. I'm not sure if you had a chance to do some of those as well.
I played both of the arena opens. I think I went 2-2 in the first draft both times. The first one I just like had a really tough seat, and I think I wound up with like a mediocre white black deck. And then the second one I went 2-2 again, and I punted a huge amount of equity in the game where I got eliminated. I think that might be why I value the completed Huntmaster so highly, is that I lost to on-board tricks because of the completed Huntmaster plus the Elvish guy that makes things bigger. It makes the incubator things double.
Oh, the combo,
so
yeah.
They had 6 mana, and I attacked into that combo, and I chump attacked with a 4/4 essentially. So it was not a good way to give myself a decent chance to win.
The Huntmaster's good. I mean, you can't attack into that card very often if you have some of the crappier cards on the battlefield just to block.
Yeah. I should have asked you this at the start. I was looking, so you're currently the reigning PT champion and world champion. I think you're the only person who's ever had those 2 titles at the same time.
Is that true? I don't
know if anyone else has mentioned that to you. I went and I looked, and I'm pretty sure it's true. Like the people who have won a PT and won worlds, there's not that many of them. And like Kai and John and Huey, they didn't have the title at the same time, and I don't think anybody else has. There's maybe 1 or 2 other people who have won a PT and worlds, and I don't think they've done it at the same time. So you're definitely on a hot streak, even though this was not that successful a tournament. For people who don't know, you went 1-2 with this deck, and then you did not do very well in constructed. I don't know what your final record was exactly, but
I went 2-7 overall. But that happens. I mean, I felt pretty good about most of my technical play over the weekend, and kind of one of those eerie tournaments when fresh off a hot streak, you're like, okay, I'm feeling really good going into this tournament. I've prepped, I've played a lot of Magic, and then you just play the games, and I kind of just had to laugh. It was just like, okay, like I'm running kind of badly, but like, how can I stay sharp? Because every match matters up until like literally the 9th round. It could be like $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 for like winning 1 or 2 more matches or something. So it was a good time though.
Yeah, for people who don't know, the arena championships are like incredibly good tournaments if you can qualify for them. Like it's much better than just qualifying for a pro tour. I mean, winning a pro tour is more prestigious, I would say, but if you had to, I mean, queuing for an arena championship is way harder than queuing for a pro tour, but it is much, much better.
Yeah.
It's kind of a shame that they don't promote them more than they do, but I've long since given up on wondering why they do things the way they do.
Yeah, I think that's a fair perspective to have. Are you going to be competing in the qualifier in a week or two or whatever, the historic qualifier?
Yeah, I play basically all the stuff you can play in arena. That I mean, like the opens and the qualifiers. I even play the silly metagame challenges just to make YouTube videos with those. Those are not competitive. You probably don't play in those.
Yeah,
they're the ones where you can just win packs. But yeah, I really am just an arena player at this point. When the MPL started, I kind of made it I intentionally stopped playing Magic Online just because I knew the MPL was going to just basically be standard. And you can't, I mean, you can play, and certainly then you could play standard on Magic Online, but if you really want to like interact with Magic Online successfully, you need to be playing the older formats too. And I didn't want to spend time doing that. And like at this point, it's just, I don't think I'm going back.
Yeah. What about Cube? I love cubing on Magic Online. That's like my main incentive to play on there.
Oh, well, so that was the thing that really got me to quit Magic Online for good, was when they finally got Cube on Arena, and I realized I just like the Arena Cube better than the Magic Online Cube.
Better than Vintage?
I have a different perspective with Vintage Cube than I think a lot of people do, where like a lot of the really old broken cards, I got to play with them like when they were first released, or I mean, like there isn't this sense of like, wow, I'm never going to get to play with this card if I don't play with it in Vintage Cube. Like I played a lot of Vintage with like physical cards when that used to be a thing you could do. And the things that were legal in standard, like I mostly played with them when they were out in standard. So it doesn't have that same appeal to me. And I also, maybe it's gotten better since the Modern Horizons cards, but I got really frustrated that they wouldn't balance the Vintage Cube. It used to be that I would play seasons where I would literally only ever draft green, blue mid-range, and I would have win rates like above 75%. Like just completely blindly only, no matter what's in the packs. There were multiple seasons where I wanted to Torrential Gearhulk and Nexus of Fate. And the only way you could do that was you had to use a Whisperwood Elemental to manifest the Nexus of Fate and then have it die. Like that was the only way the Nexus of Fate could stay in your graveyard in the cube. So
did you pull that off?
No, but I would just cube every time. Before I had seen any cards, I was like, I'm going to draft green blue because I just want to do this, and that's the only thing I care about. And green blue is also just the best archetype in those iterations by so much that it took a lot of the fun of it out for me. Like I think I kind of gathered that they've made it so Storm isn't just a giant trap now.
No, they haven't.
No.
I mean, Breach the Multiverse. Underworld Breach is not a giant scam, so you can just take that card and call it Storm with any combination of things. But Storm itself is pretty bad.
Yeah, like when I stopped doing it, I thought Reanimator was a scam, Storm was a scam, Mono Red was a scam, and it was just like I just played green blue mid-range every time, and it was so much better than the other stuff. But I guess it's changed some. I really like.
I think the black decks are good now. Oh. Yeah, I liked when they did the Arena Cube for the Arena Open event. That was one of my favorite events they've done. That was awesome.
Yeah, that was I think the last time I cashed an Arena Open, and that was great. I wish. I mean, I guess they can't run Arena Opens every weekend, but if they ran a Cube one like every weekend, I would play every time. It would be great.
Yeah, I would love that. I mean, I'm all for more arena opens. The real argument that always gets made against that is, are players going to get sick of it? But the reality is that I think that there is probably enough people who play every arena open that it could probably be self-sustaining at this point. I could be wrong. Maybe there's people that lose enough that that could be the case, but I could definitely see it being so that people will just play every weekend.
I almost it almost broke me trying to make day 2 of the Open when it was what the set before this one was at Phyrexia. All will be one.
Oh, that sealed format was tough.
I think I probably fired like 10 to 15 bullets. That was the end of all of my gems that I built up. I had to start actually trying to accumulate gems again on Arena.
Yeah, I've had those days. I definitely have done like 10 plus arena open bullets and being like, what am I doing with my time right now? Like I feel like such a strong sunk cost here that I'm just not gonna give up until I get there. But what exactly am I doing?
Yeah, the Arena Opens are certainly great. Do you play the Arena Cube much?
No, I mean, my philosophy is basically the casual games that I want to play of Magic, like, you know, if I'm not prepping for a tournament or playing, are with friends, like teaching them and working with them, or like otherwise, if I'm just playing for fun, like I'll be in a call and kind of goofing off, and that could be something that I'd like to watch, but I'd usually not want to pilot if I were doing something like that, just because I definitely get exhausted from it after a while.
Yeah. Well, I would encourage you. I think they call it Chromatic Cube or Tinkerer's Cube. There's one of the cubes. They're probably never going to do it again because it was so unbalanced. It was hilarious. It was like it was only expensive cards, and like it was so hard to interact with what your opponent was doing. But it was just so funny because like the best card by far was the Teamer Ultimatum. I think.
What? That's the best card.
Most of the games, maybe that wasn't the best card. It was like the best strategy though. It was like the poster child for the best strategy. Most of the games involved using like Mythos of Aluna to copy. There was like a double vision. That was that was the best thing that you could do in the cube. Was you had the Mythos of Aluna, your double vision, or your Mirari Conjecture.
So you were just trying to go as big as you could in every single game?
Yeah, because like nobody could stop either person from doing anything really. I mean, you could play. There was one card that was, I think it's Spell Swindle, the 5-mana counter that you get treasures.
Oh, that's broken. Get 3 treasures, counter something.
No, you got as many treasures as they spent.
Oh no! Oh my!
It was very easy to go from like, wow, this thing's going to resolve and I'm going to win, to like, oh no, I just played this thing and I'm probably never going to get another turn. That cube was a lot of fun, but it was so unbalanced that I don't think that they would do it again.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate all your time, and I think people are really going to appreciate your insights into the format. So
yeah, of course. Yeah, and if you ever want to do another video in the future or anything whatsoever, send me a message. I'm happy to do something. I mean, this is what I do all day. I am also starting to record for YouTube and should have some stuff out in a few weeks. So I'll be a little more entrenched with creating content, and should be fun.
All right. Well, thanks again. And I will. Do you have your channel set up? Should I put a link to it, or is that to be determined?
Yeah, we'll keep that one to be determined for now, but it should be in the near future.
All right. What kind of video is it going to be? Like spiky learn how to play decks videos, or what can people expect?
I would say that something a little more. So part of it should be like more competitive focused, and I would say that's like talking about decks from recent events, and then the general content I would expect is a little more casual focused, even including potentially like CDH or other fun collaborations with people, just sort of interacting with the Magic community, and yeah, should be a good time.
All right. Well, people have got that to look forward to. So thanks for that, and I'll see you guys next time.